right, so today we're heading to the gym to train some splits, side splits specifically, also known as middle split, box split, whatever the hell you want to call it. A little backstory on my journey. I didn't start taking flexibility training really seriously until I suffered a bad injury in powerlifting. So as a powerlifter, that was my primary training format, trying to get on an international stage as a powerlifter at the time. I suffered a bicep rupture. Kind of felt like I lost my identity and like who I was. Like I was a powerlifter. So as a coach, like my job, like I was a very strength specialized coach. And then I had this injury and I couldn't do any of that shit. And I think the other side of it too for me at that time in my life was I had become a family man, kids. I was more middle-aged. I think I was around 30 or so. That injury kind of had put me in this place where I was like, man, I'm not in very good shape. Like, I'm capable of doing 3 things really well: squat, bench, and deadlift. And my flexibility and mobility was a very big limiting factor for me in like trying to rebuild myself. And obviously there was a big component of that was like changing my body composition and getting myself in good physical shape. But to realize that like a lot of the things that I wanted to do always came down to my flexibility. And at that point is when I really made the switch and I was like, I'm gonna get flexible as fuck. And that's when it kind of took a turn and I started really getting into studying flexibility training and methods. Had a stint in yoga. It wasn't the solution at all. It all came down to strength. Like when you start really studying how people can get flexible, it comes down to developing strength. And that was when I started making a lot of connections to flexibility training. When you start training splits, you start understanding the process of becoming more flexible. And one of the big reasons is because you have a goal. Like what you're working towards. Like improvements in splits, how is that measured? What do you look for? What kind of components do you add to it? So I recommend that to anybody. And even at a basic level of starting to train flexibility, there should be some foundations of splits training in there, particularly for lower body, because it's like the biggest expression of range of motion in the lower body. So, and for most people that want to improve their flexibility, they need to know why they're doing it. I think just humans in general, we need to know our why. Why do I need to improve my cardio? What's the outcome? Like, why should I do that? Why do I need to build muscle or strength train? And that's where I think splits can just teach you more than anything about flexibility, is just that journey to splits. Yeah, that's a little background into some of my shit, and you're gonna get to see how I've kind of come to training my splits. I've obtained splits at quite a high level, pretty much 180 degrees. Got to a point where I was training elevated splits. That was kind of at that point I was like, I don't know how far I want to take this. I think that was a big shift for me as well too, is then figuring out how do you maintain splits or integrate splits with traditional models of training. And that's really how a lot of my methods and approaches are presented now, is like, how do we start and how do we start doing it without giving up everything? So you'll get a little glimpse into some of that today with seeing my session, and I'm going to answer some other questions as we're getting into it that have been asked from other people that follow Range of Strength, and we'll get into it. Yeah, I'm just getting into horse stance now, and specifically like we're training horse stance for improving flexibility, improving the side split. This is different than horse stance in martial arts. Why do I need to do horse stance, and how should I do horse stance? Well, the person that really brought this to light as to like why we should change our thinking around it was Thomas Kurz. So Stretching Scientifically, he brings up how we should think about being in this horse riding stance. And like really what we're getting into with horse stance training and side split training is the ability to express strength in a wide stance. So my horse stance work is going to be loaded today, and the bottom loaded position is my preferred way of loading horse stance and teaching it. What it actually teaches us is while maintaining all those expressions of the horse stance, we're actually learning to pull ourselves upright and be in that stronger extension. I'm going to be complementing my horse stance work with some very deep inner range adductor work. I like to think of it as like flexibility supersets, where you're going to take that lengthened tissue and complement it with a very short inner range contraction to just give it a little bit more conditioning, a little bit more care. So I'm going to be doing in range adductor lifts. Most people have a lack of preparation in the adductors, both on the lengthening side, which is the stretch position, and the shortening side when it comes to training side splits. So these adductor lifts are a great prerequisite to work on, as well as like your length and stuff. And you should be able to at least lift maybe 10% of your body weight, like with that. It's just a good kind of have these like ideas in mind as to how strong should this or that be. Set 2. I'm going to go through 3 rounds of this. So I'm going to now get into some specific work for splits. I'm going to be starting from passive split and then working myself to my active. Warming up my passive split, I'm going to start with as much support as possible. I'm going to use my sliders because I'm going to work on some contractions here from the side into a range that I just feel like I'm just barely in the stretch. But I can maintain tilted pelvis in the right position. Asked a lot about my feet. People are like, oh, your ankles are sick. Like, not really. I'm just finding a way to get the feet flat. So it's not that I'm turning my feet in all the way internally rotated like this and being flat, which that there's like not too bad, but I'm actually externally rotating and staying flat. And then I'm going to relax. On the relaxation, you don't need to push more range. Most people do that too often. They think, I'm not opening up. It's like, because you're trying to force it. You still have to work, focus more on your contraction than trying to force this range open. That's the reality of splits training right there. But that's just a warm-up set. So my passive work is going to continue. I'm going to move into side split push-ups. Pelvis positioned correctly here. So this is like a really good starting point for me. So I got that anterior tilt, feeling pretty comfortable. And so what I'm going to do is when I come down, I'm going to think about opening my legs. And when I come up, I'm going to think about squeezing them in. So there's not a lot of swaying from the hips here, but I'm trying to maintain good flexion of the hips. So if I push into them a little bit, that's going to be all right, but not too much to the point where I lose integrity of my side split. Some things to consider here. Complementary actions to that. So I mean, the big thing that comes up a lot of times is like, how often should I train splits, and can I combine splits together? When I see a lot of these questions, the first thing that resonates with me is like, do you really want to train the splits? So that question comes up a lot. What's happening at the hips? But it's this moment of ER where we push into some IR and embrace that hip flexion and tilted pelvis a bit more so that we can override the demand to abduct more, and then we ER again. One of the big questions that came up, like it comes up a lot, is knee pain. There's a couple of reasons why this is happening. Of all the adductors, the gracilis is the one that comes down, ties in to the medial aspect of your knee. So that's what you're feeling a lot of times when you feel knee discomfort, is your gracilis muscle could be pulling. If that's happening, we could think about some soft tissue work on that area
I like to use the barbell for it, where the barbell is just a little more round and thin. It can bite into the gracilis area a little bit better than like a big thick foam roller. But the other thing that happens there when we get knee pain is it's a lot of times because we lost integrity of the hips. So that tilted pelvis, we're forcing our range, and then your knee's just taking all the load. So a lot of times what I will actually prescribe for people that are experiencing knee discomfort is when they're getting into their side split, assume a soft knee. So basically bend the knees a little bit if you're experiencing that pain, and it'll take some of that load off the knee and also take some of the load off the gracilis, because it might be pulling because you're losing the integrity of the hip there. If you really want to start training splits, you just got to make separate time for it. Like, that's going to be like my no bullshit response to those of you out there that keep asking questions about how do I do it with all this other stuff, or can I do it all on the same day, and how quick can I get it? You probably could shoot the shit about that stuff. By the end of the day, what you need to hear is, like, if you really do want to obtain a side split, you need to find time to devote to it separately. That'll be the best way for you to learn and see the best result. Training shouldn't take no more than 30, 40 minutes, if you think about it. But that's not a lot to ask, right? If you actually used to have splits and you're trying to get it back, in my experience, these people need to start with strength. You need to start with just conditioning yourself. These kind of positions require conditioning that a lot of people don't consider. It's like always thought of as this very passive endeavor. Range of strength kind of defines what flexibility training really is. It's a form of training your range with strength. You need to start taking this approach if you haven't, if you're trying to regain your split or regain a level of flexibility that you maybe used to have. And if you're just trying to gain flexibility, this is where you got to start, right?